Welcome, my name is John Glanville and this is video 15 in the Calmness in Mind series. In the last video we explored how we may develop cover stories that mask some of our triggers, which are really just trapped energy from past trauma suddenly being released from the stored kinetic energy in our atomic battery, which actually is a good thing, but we tend to label the experience as anxiety or fear as the potential energy is converted to kinetic energy through the agitation of our physical body, like we discussed in video 9. Now in this video, I'm going to teach you more about how this happens and what you can do to accelerate your ability to find, understand, and then release this unwanted buildup of stuck energy from within your atoms that was accumulated from a lifetime of trying to escape from or hold down all types of emotion. This is video part 1. It's the explanation phase. And in part 2, there will be an in-depth meditation that I will teach you that will show you how to find and release these traumas. As ever, let me use metaphors and models to describe what's happening, rather than getting stuck in conventional medical terminology, which, as we know, has a bias towards the pharmacological treatment of symptoms rather than the exploration of preventative strategies that avoid those symptoms from ever having to manifest in the first place. And because we're exploring anxiety, OCD and depression, which are symptoms, it's through working on the causes that I think offer us the greatest chance of recovery. And remember too that the feeling of anxiety falls into two categories. Firstly, the resultant emotional energy from the fight or flight, from the triggering of your amygdala by some pre-programmed fear. And hopefully up until now your exposure therapy is starting to work and is beginning to retrain your amygdala, assuming that you're doing the work. And I'm hoping that you're freaking out a bit less. I'm hoping that you're worrying a bit less, and I'm hoping that your emotional battery is beginning to recharge, which of course is a very good thing. Then the second group of anxious feelings are the stuck energy that's being released from your atomic energy battery, which feels like anxiety, but it's just potential energy converting to kinetic energy, like I said, which is a wonderful thing. And I think should be encouraged rather than being feared. So as I changed my career from delivering engineering solutions to the delivery of therapeutic solutions, the first repetitive pattern that I recognized was this. As people began doing the work, as they started to feel better, as they thought they were making great progress, suddenly they would encounter periods where the anxiety would come back, perhaps even worse than it had been before. And obviously this confused, scared and demoralized them, and it made no sense to them, and it made no sense to me either. I assumed that it was because they'd been putting in a lot of effort, because they'd been experiencing some positive change, that they'd backed off from doing the exposure therapy, doing the meditation, doing the homework. But it turned out though that was only half the problem. In reality, as the individual began to worry less, became calmer, became more accepting of their emotions, this calmness was interpreted by the atomic battery as the ideal opportunity for it to begin releasing all the trapped potential energy from all the past traumas, all the emotions that it had been holding down, which up until that point it couldn't release, because every time it did release it, it freaked the person out because they thought it was anxiety. The atomic energy battery holding the charge from the past makes the body dense, heavy. It slows down the vibration of the body, and this exhausts the emotional battery. And I think naturally the body wants to release this trapped potential energy, but up until this point, every time it did, the person got completely anxious, couldn't handle it, so they pushed it all back down again or tried to control everything around them in their life. I'm going to repeat something that I said in my last video. As you rise out of depression, you seem to go into anxiety, which, although it feels bad, you seem to have more energy available to you to do things. Then as you rise out of anxiety, you step into anger, which, though still a negative energy, has more power than anxiety. So you start saying no, or you begin to make changes in your life. Then from these changes that you make in your life, because of the anger, you feel pride in what you've achieved, which moves you up into the level of courage, which is simply the ability to feel vulnerable, yet get on with doing whatever needs doing for your own well-being. A person without anxiety, without depression, might say something like, after I lost my job, I was angry. I was angry for a couple of days, and then I was tearful for a couple of days, and then I felt a little better. They don't worry too much about their emotions. They don't worry if their emotions come up, and they don't give their emotions a story. They're okay being angry, or being disappointed, or being sad. And they just let those energies arise, and they don't fight them. They stay out of all the what-if stories about the future and the if-only stories about the past. Okay, like we explained in video number 10. They tend to live in the now. Let me process the pain of the now. Let me get it out. Let me decide what actions I can take now that will move me on in my future. These are the viewpoints and the strategies that anxious and depressed people, I think, need to begin to copy and to adopt. But the reason they don't is because they unknowingly run strategies that endeavour to avoid their pain, to control their situation. So I think it would be very prudent for us to explore the top 4 strategies that people consciously or unconsciously use to avoid feeling bad. That way, you'll know where to place your focus when you're ready to get the change that you're looking for. Now, the first strategy commonly used to avoid emotional pain is called suppression. It's where you consciously decide to not think about your problem. You push it away, you ignore it, you know something needs addressing, you know something needs sorting out, but you just kind of push it back. Examples might include knowing that you need to change your job, but saying, oh, let's wait 6 months and see what happens. Knowing that your tooth needs a filling, but saying, oh, it's all right, it might go away by itself. Or perhaps a friend's being horrible to you and you say, well, what can you do? It's just the way they are. This is you consciously knowing that you're not happy, that there's something that needs addressing, but you're suppressing those thoughts, those stories, those feelings, those emotions, and you're not facing them. You're not facing that which you know needs to be sorted out. You're suppressing the emotions in your body. You're pushing away the stories in your mind to avoid the pain of the now. Be that fear, pain, loss, fear of conflict, loss of money, status, relationship, or just a plain fear of change. Can you see how you are consciously making the decision to not make a decision? Okay, you're delaying, you're procrastinating, and you're pushing it away. Of course, the stories may back off a little. The pain may temporarily abate, but they don't go away. They just hover in the background, bringing more doubt and slowly agitating you in the background, running down your own emotional energy battery. And then, as you know, when the battery gets low, your little 8-year-old steps in with sabotage to pull you away from life. Brings in stories of doubt, sabotages your sleep, sabotages relationships, sabotages your memory, increases your anxiety. You know the story. You get tired, you struggle to make decisions, and you begin to doubt yourself. This conscious story of suppression to avoid pain or conflict in the moment, it just doesn't work. Doesn't work. Now, the second way that people commonly use, knowingly or unknowingly, to avoid feeling uncomfortable in the now is called expression. It's when you react, or you get angry, or you become forceful in the now to try and make the discomfort of that moment stop as soon as possible. Dominant, forceful, vocal individuals tend to use this strategy, or those who flip between a sort of a passive and aggressive behavior, from victim to aggressor in just a few seconds. They fly off the handle. They shout and they say, it's your fault, you're doing this to me, why would you do that? And by exploding or expressing their emotions in this way, it forces those around them to walk on eggshells, or to act in ways that stop the individual from feeling uncomfortable in that moment. Once again, can you see that they're not addressing their fears? They're just controlling other people to not push their buttons. And nobody wins in these situations, and it creates an exhausting and emotionally turbulent environment. Now, the third way that people try to avoid their bad feelings, and this is probably the most common, is they distract themselves from their bad feelings by placing their focus of attention on some other activity or pastime. They may become a workaholic, as this distracts them from their pain. They might spend hours and hours in the gym focusing on their exercise, which is distracting them from their pain. They spend hours playing computer games, which of course is distracting them from their pain. They stare at their phone. Drugs, alcohol, sex, OCD compulsions, they take them away from their underlying pain. Relationships, anything that you can consciously focus on to distract yourself from your anxiety, fear, pain, or discomfort. However, by avoiding your anxiety, you're not processing it. You're not discharging your atomic battery, whilst at the same time you're exhausting your emotional battery by working so hard on whatever it is you're using to distract yourself. It's an exhausting catch-22 loop of distraction that kind of works until you finally collapse exhausted and confused, and you're left with more problems that need addressing very often than before you started. Now, as we continue through this course, I will be teaching you ways to break these three patterns: the suppression, the expression, and the avoidance, through understanding who you are, through increasing your self-esteem, your confidence, by understanding your personality type in a lot more detail, by allowing you to accept things in a far greater way, by allowing you to embrace change, and for you to see calmness and happiness in a whole new way. Now, this particular video is going to explore the fourth way that people avoid feeling uncomfortable, and that's through something called unconscious repression. This is where your own unconscious mind hides from your conscious mind some traumas that occurred in your past. So you have no memory of them actually happening. Or perhaps the unconscious mind changes the conscious memory of what happened, so perhaps you thought you were wronged, when in fact it may have been you who did the bad thing. And trust me, as weird as this seems, we do this all the time. So, repression is where your own unconscious, it steps in to mask the traumas from your conscious mind to stop you having to feel the pain of them. Of course, though, the pain is still there, the truth is still there, but it's held down. It's hidden under your cover stories, and the energy has been stuffed down into your atomic battery, just waiting, always waiting for a chance to vent out. And if we can let it vent out and just be with it, with no story, this is a huge step forward on your path to emotional freedom. Now, I don't want to worry you or scare you, but we all have these repressed traumas. You almost can't go through childhood without having them installed within you, from something seemingly as harmless as being told off by a teacher in your class, right through to some horrific sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. And in this video, I'm going to teach you how to find these repressed emotions, how to release them, and then how to evaporate your cover story, which of course no longer serves you well. I will be talking more about this later, but first we need to understand more about what we're really dealing with. So when it's time to go searching for these repressed traumas, that we are strategically well equipped. So let's look at emotions in a completely different way. If I said to an anxious or an OCD person, what I'd like you to do is go home, have your dinner, then sit down in your living room at maybe 7 p.m. and just sit there quietly till maybe 11 p.m. and then get yourself off to bed. And they'd say, well, just sit there doing nothing for 4 hours I'd say, yeah. They said, well, could I watch TV? I said, no, just sit there. What about reading or using my phone? No, just sit patiently there. And they'd say, I can't do that. They'd say, I don't want to do that. Okay. And I'd say, why? They'd say, because I'll get bored, I'll get anxious, I'll start worrying about things, and I don't want to do that. Now, to me, this points out two major perspectives that I think an anxious person needs to be very aware of. Firstly, I think you need to learn how to sit with yourself and do nothing. To live from the perspective of the observer, the rider of the horse, who knows that now is the only reality, who's able to observe the horse and the ego, the conditioning, all of which find the now really, really boring. So they start proposing, and this is unconscious of course, they start proposing all sorts of stories about the past, stories about the future, which may well of course make you feel anxious. Now, because I've done a lot of meditation over the years, it always makes me smile to think that the worst punishment we have in prison is solitary confinement. Essentially, the punishment is, I'm going to punish you by locking you away with your own mind for a long period of time. Because it's funny to me, because on the other side, people pay money to learn how to sit in silence. Monks take vows of silence. Gurus meditate in silence in caves for years. They're not worrying about the past. They've got no story that anything should be any different from that which it is in that particular moment. And the second behavioural characteristic that I think is worth exploring is, as we sit as the rider watching our little horsey, is whatever emotions rise up, we need to just be able to accept them, to be with them, okay, to give them no story, or at the very least to be able to separate the story from the emotion. We talked about this in the earlier videos. To change our own perspective from, ooh, I feel anxious, to, interesting, stuck energy is flowing up through me, wonderful, better out than in, I can just sit with this. I'm very aware that I'm repeating myself. But until your mindset can click over to new perspectives, you'll always be living as a victim to your emotions. And A, that's no fun, and B, it's exhausting. So when I was doing the work to change myself, to let go of my anxiety, my OCD, it really helped me when an author or a teacher would tell stories about what they went through, how things made them feel, what challenges they faced, and how they dealt with them. You know, to me, it kind of made it more raw. It made them more real. So in that vein, I'm going to share with you one of my adventures. Everything changed for me when I swapped the perceived security and the denied stress of my job as a sales director of an engineering software company for the freedom but perceived insecurity of running my own therapy practice. I made the jump. I changed careers. I became a therapist. Turned out to be the best thing I ever did. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. You have to jump and then you find out. Okay. And not only did I discover who I was, okay, I discovered what I wanted. And even more important, I discovered how I wanted to do it. And during this time, I kept working on myself. I had mentors. I had a prolific book reading habit. And everybody kept saying to me, John, you need to learn how to meditate. And up to that point, I'd, to be honest, played lip service to meditation. I'd sat on courses, I'd read books, but I just couldn't do it. My mind would just get louder and louder. And in my head, the message was it should be getting quieter and quieter. I really, really tried. And I have to say, I really, really failed, which made me even more frustrated because it seemed that everybody else, sitting there like little monks, it looked like they found it all so easy. After a year or so of trying everything, I was absolutely on the verge of giving up meditation when I read about something called Vipassana, which is basically one of Indians' really ancient forms of meditation. And I think it means something like to see things as they really are. Okay, it is a 10-day silent meditation retreat, 10 hours of meditation each day, no books, no phones, men and women are segregated, the food is vegetarian, no eye contact, no speaking for 10 days. And I think the fancy name for that is noble silence. So I thought, if you're going to learn how to meditate, what better place? So I dived in, I turned up, and there are about 150 people in attendance. The men lived and ate together, as did the women. And then both sexes rejoined, but were still segregated within a large and beautiful meditation hall. And before we started, the leader, he explained a few things. And what stood out in my mind was, he said, if the person next to you begins to cry, it's none of your business. None of your business. Stay out of their way, okay? Don't engage with them. If you engage with them, you're interrupting your meditation, and you're interrupting their meditation. He then said, in the meditation hall, don't look across to the women. And he said, we'll be saying to the women, don't look across to the men. And then he reminded us that there was absolutely no talking, no eye contact, no physical contact, no phones, no books, no writing, nothing. We would be meditating, sleeping, or walking, or eating for 10 days, all in complete silence. So we woke up at 4:30 the next morning to a little gong, and we wandered over to the meditation hall. And I got to be honest, I was quite excited because somebody was finally going to teach me how to meditate. So I get myself all comfortable. I tried to not look at the girls and failed. And then we began. And we were set the task of focusing on our breath, feeling the air going into our nostrils on the in-breath, and then sensing it as it popped out on the top lip as we breathed out. And I expected that little process to last for about 10 minutes or so. But no, it went on for 1.5 hours. And my mind was bored after the first 3 minutes. And it just went on and on and on and on. To make things worse, the guy next to me was a real fidget. Okay, and he was wearing like a noisy windbreaker jacket that made a funny nylon scratching noise every time he moved. And there was an old guy sitting behind me about 3 feet back from my head. And I guess he had some sort of medical condition where he could only breathe through his mouth in a laboured snoring kind of way. And he sort of sounded like Darth Vader. So by the end of the first session, I'd gone from being quite excited to wanting to tell one neighbour to sit still, and to tell the guy behind to stop snoring. And that's without bringing in the lady who kept coughing, the guy who kept crying, and my own mind that was just completely and utterly torturing me. Without doubt, the longest 90 minutes of my life. And all I could hear all the way through was my own mind saying, see, told you so, told you can't meditate, just go home, don't waste your time, you've got all these other things you could be doing. When it ended, we wandered over to the canteen to have our weird, silent, vegetarian breakfast. And then before we knew it, we're back in the meditation hall for round 2 of the day's 7 meditation sessions. And we sit down, and the teacher said, same again. Another 90 minutes of watching your breath. And then again in session 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And by the time the evening session came, about 10% of the people had gone home. They'd had enough, okay? Except for Russell and Darth Vader, as the judge in my mind had now named my selfish and annoying colleagues. This had been one of the longest days of my life, and definitely the most annoying. Came that close to going home myself, but I knew this was about letting go of what others did, rather than making them the focus of my attention and my thoughts. So I stayed. Day 2 was exactly the same. Focus on the feeling of the air going into your nostrils and sense it on the top lip as you breathe out. And although it was still a nightmare, there were small successes where I could keep my awareness on my breath for a few moments here and there, rather than on what Russell or Darth Vader were doing. A funny thing happened on the second day though. Randomly, people would just start crying. And one person crying would kick off another person crying, and another one. And by the afternoon, I was doing pretty well. I was managing to focus on my breath for longer and longer periods of time, until out of nowhere, I just burst out crying. And it was a deep sob coming up from deep within me, and for no apparent reason that I could put my finger on. It's really weird. Crying in a silent room full of people who don't know you, who are not looking at you, and who are completely ignoring you. Well, they should have been. And as the crying backed off, I felt a lot better. It's like something had lifted, like something had vented out of me. I didn't know what it was, but it felt good. I felt lighter. Back then, I didn't know about the atomic energy battery, how we held trapped trauma in our atoms. And of course, in that moment, my battery had let something go. On the third day, we're still focusing on the breathing when another person started to cry, which started me off again, sobbing and venting another stuck trauma. This time though, as it backed off, okay, as it was released out of my body, okay, from my unconscious into my conscious awareness came a memory that I'd forgotten about since I was 8 or 9 years old, okay, about being nearly trampled on by a herd of bulls that were stampeding, and I was nearly killed walking across a field. That was certainly a traumatic event for young me, and I guess my unconscious mind or my ego had kept me safe by saying, let's hide that memory from his conscious awareness. That way he'll be able to still function in the countryside, you know. And that return of that memory, oh my God, the thing with the bull, suddenly made sense of the many strange thoughts and behaviors that young me had gone through. Because all the memory had been hidden. Every time I'd gone near large animals like cows and horses, I always felt really uncomfortable, anxious, even though consciously I knew that they were reasonably safe animals. My amygdala was still firing off from that old installed trauma, pattern matching large animals, but my conscious mind couldn't reconcile that fear with any feeling, with any reason, because my unconscious mind had repressed and hidden that memory. So my cover stories began to be formed. Oh, it's too muddy in that field. Or I'm allergic to horses. Or, well, it's just silly to trust big horses. Can you see how this works? And this is why I talked about cover stories in video 14. And it's why I'll be teaching you how to go looking for these repressed memories and traumas, which of course is hard because you don't know what you're looking for. Now, I hope this is making sense. Now, in the afternoon of day 3, after something like 25 hours of frustration meditation, I finally got the breakthrough that I desperately needed. I closed my eyes, I focused on my breath, and this time it was relatively easy. I could keep my attention. Then after about 20 minutes, the teacher said, okay, time for a break. And I just sat there, okay, and I was completely shocked, okay. An hour and a half had passed, and to me, it only felt like 20 minutes, maybe even less than 20 minutes. I actually sat there stunned, okay. It had almost even been enjoyable. And then it dawned on me what had happened. Obviously, Darth Vader had gone home, and the silence had allowed me to focus on my meditation. But as I turned around, there he is, sitting there. And as soon as I saw him, his noisy breathing came back into my focus. And I sat there for a few more minutes trying to figure out what had happened to me. And I glanced over to where the girls were, and there was a woman sitting there, and my judge had a field day, okay, commenting on how this one woman was wearing the same clothes as on day 1, and she had a big bedhead thing going on, and now she had no makeup when on day 1 she had been completely made up. And then of course the answer just came and just slapped me around the face. The reason for the silence on the course, the reason for the gender separation on the course, the reason for the anonymity was because our egos were being hung out to dry. I looked down and I was wearing the same clothes for the same 3 days. I hadn't shaved for 3 days, and I think if I had hair, I'd have had a bedhead thing going on too, okay? Our egos try to keep us safe by looking out there, by measuring everything, by comparing ourselves to everybody, by making sure we don't look stupid, make sure we don't do the wrong thing. And over the last 3 days, it had nothing to do. Nobody was looking at you, nobody was talking to you. And I think what happened is it just backed off, and suddenly my attention went internally. And of course, with my focus internally, I wouldn't be listening to Russell or Darth, you know, or even have any awareness of time, because time is only an out there concept. And it's hardly useful at all when you go inside, because inside it's always now. Of course, you probably know about this, and I'd read about this in books. And naively, I thought I understood the concept. But to actually experience it was wonderful, and it was shocking. And ultimately, it was a complete game changer in the way I looked at life and in how I moved forward. In any moment, was my attention out there or in here? And remember, we're developing advanced skill sets and the knowledge to be able to place our awareness into either realm, our objective out there world or our subjective in here world. So by day 4, I'd learned how to keep my awareness on my body rather than my thoughts, where a whole new world of internal sensations, feelings and energies exist, okay? And with some practice, you can kind of move them around your body. Now, as the days passed, the meditations became even more relaxing. Time became less and less important, kind of like a detached concept. Then strange things happened to me. I was moving sensations or energy, whatever you want to call it, around your body quite freely, but I couldn't move it through the right side of my breast area. I could go above and below, but I couldn't go through. And then a year later, I found a swelling and I needed an operation to remove an egg-sized lump from my right breast. My body had, of course, unconsciously known something was wrong, but I was still in the infancy of my conscious awareness of learning to engage and listen to my own body. I was in the process of reversing my many years of fearing my body's emotions to this new way of being with, accepting and releasing my emotions. It was as if I finally realized that my inside world was as important as the outside world, if not more important. And the last thing that I want to share with you happened over the last few days of the retreat. I was relaxed, meditating. Time was irrelevant, what was happening externally out there, irrelevant. There could have been a war going on and I wouldn't have known. And actually, that was okay. We were looking at things differently. When suddenly my left hand, it started to feel tense, like it was throbbing, and my fingers slowly kind of moved towards a sort of claw-type configuration, very stiff and very tense. And this really surprised me because I was calm, my mind was calm, I was meditating, everything was good. And I was really intrigued by this tension, okay? And then it slowly relaxed, and then it sort of came back again. And the same thing happened with my nose and my face. It felt like somebody was squeezing my nose and my whole face would go numb, and it was quite a scary feeling. Prior to the retreat, these kind of things going on in my body, in my hands and my face, they would have bothered me, they would have scared me. But now, after sitting with my body, I knew that this was trauma being released from within me. And I realized I just needed to get out of its way. And I had to make sure I didn't add any more stories, nor let the release frighten me. I just needed to keep my awareness on it and just lovingly surrender to whatever sensation here or wherever it was until it passed, no matter what. Just let it go. And over the next few days, this continued, okay? It seemed that the calmer I became, the quieter my mind was, the more these things would begin to arise, like in waves, come in and going. And then it wouldn't be there for one session and it would come back for the next one. Coming and going, coming and going. Very occasionally, when a wave was released, a memory would pop into my mind about school, my family, life. Sometimes it made sense and sometimes it didn't. But as ever, I tried to stay out of the stories. What matters is we release any stuck energy from past traumas, regardless of the story or even the truth of the story. After the retreat, one of my mentors asked me if I'd ever had trauma to either my left hand or my face. And I said, yeah, I had. I said, I burnt my hand quite badly when I was young, and I broke a few bones in my left hand. And my face had quite a lot of trauma because I'd broken my nose quite a few times. And when I was young, I'd fallen off of a bridge and crashed headfirst through a frozen river, causing lots of facial trauma, as well as implanting my amygdala with really big fears around water. And he said that often places where we experience physical trauma are where the energy seemed to be released from, i.e. my left hand and my face. And that often people's traumas may be released metaphorically from the type of trauma experienced. What I mean by that, so a woman who was sexually abused may get pain or sensations in her pelvis or stomach area. A person who couldn't run away from a traumatic situation may feel it in their legs. A person who didn't feel emotionally nourished may feel it in their breast. A person who feels the weight of responsibility may feel it in their neck and shoulders. A person who experienced some sort of injustice may experience it through their sinuses, like the blocking the stench of a cover-up. And so it goes on. I don't think we need to worry too much about where and why, metaphorically or physically, these things happen. We just need to accept that the release of the trauma comes out in different parts of our body, okay? And to give it no story, okay? And to just be okay with any sensation that you may be experiencing. Over the years, I've seen this venting or this release of trauma in many, many ways. And I'd like to just list a few so that you can have some awareness, okay? The more common ones that I see daily are numbness, a heat, or pins and needles sensations, a shooting sensation through the nerves of your arms and legs, clenching or stiffening of muscles, a bursting out of crying, whole bodies physically shaking, an arm or a leg uncontrollably sort of quivering, okay? Occasionally a person may vomit or go through the motion of vomiting, but vomit doesn't come out, but it's weird. It's like sort of energy comes out. It's a weird one, but it's pretty cool, okay? Strange sounds or gushing air comes out of the mouth. Once again, that's scary, but it's okay if you can just sit back and surrender to it, if you don't fight it. This happened to me quite a few times when I had some of my biggest releases. It was like strange noises and air coming out of my mouth. Headaches, a tightness in the face or skull, spasms in your back or down your legs. I hope you're getting the picture. In all these moments, the rider sits back, surrenders, stays out of the stories, and just lets the emotions flow up, okay, through the horse. If it gets too much, you can gently calm yourself down with a calm inner dialogue. It's okay. We can let this go. Or into the diaphragmatic breathing, which we taught in earlier videos. And then let the lungs pull the air back in again. If you're still overwhelmed and you're still scared, jump into the tap-in to calm yourself down. But acknowledge that in that moment that you're interrupting it, you're halting the release that is the very release needed for your recovery. Especially for depression. Getting this deep stuff out seems to lift depression. It's one of those weird things that I've noticed over and over again. Now, for those of you with health anxiety, which is the polite word for hypochondria, the very sensations you fear may actually be your key to freedom. Perhaps they are the wonderful release of your trauma, which unknowingly you keep distracting yourself from or pushing back down through suppression, expression, avoidance, and repression. Perhaps give that some thought as you start to let go of trying to control these things. Now, in the last section, and before we jump into the meditation stage that will be covered in the next video, I want to outline a very important aspect of personal growth work that people often miss. How can you find a trapped trauma or repressed memories if your unconscious mind has hidden these from your conscious mind? Yeah? Or if your unconscious mind has swapped this story around. So consciously you think they did something when in fact you might have done something to them. Okay? Or what if your traumatic reality is cloaked under conscious beliefs and nested under cover stories that may be conscious or unconscious, so you don't really know what you're actually looking for. I remember an older American psychologist friend of mine telling me, John, you'll never know what the client's real trauma truly is. They don't even know themselves. He said that's why here in the US, people are in therapy for years. They don't know it, but we're just keeping them talking about this and that, mum and dad, school and friends, until one day, boom, an entire trauma comes up. They have an abreaction. They sob, they shake. Sometimes a memory is revealed and sometimes it's not. But something within them shifts. They're different. They're lighter. He said, it's a shame we have to go fishing for all those traumas. What about this? What about this? What about this? He said, I wish there was a routine that they could use on themselves to find these trapped traumas, to uncover these repressed memories. So this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be teaching you a way that you can do this to yourself in a structured process within a meditation that you can use each day to slowly and gently tease your own unconscious into releasing from within you that which up until now it thinks it's been protecting from you. As ever, let's try and put the process into a metaphor. I think it's like being a bomb disposal specialist and you're looking at a plot of overgrown land, knowing there are some landmines in there, but where? And you're going to have to get a big stick and start prodding all over the land, everywhere, until bang, whoo, found one, okay? And then off you go, every square foot of the land, prodding, 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 until every square foot has been tested. And what if these landmines were nested, one on top or one under, one's buried under another one, okay? It could be that you need to go around a second time, prodding all the land until you find them, or even a third time, until you've discovered everything that's buried down there. And to me, this is like your conscious mind wondering where in the unconscious are all these hidden traumas, okay? Those landmines that we're seeking to unearth, to untangle, and then lovingly neutralize via a controlled explosion, venting that pent-up, stored energy, okay? A potential energy out through dissipation, through kinetic energy, which feels like anxiety, but it's not. How wonderful. It comes out. And in the next video, I'll teach you how to go about finding and safely detonating these landmines from your horse's atomic body. Until then, I'd like you to start to embrace vulnerability, start making decisions, become a little bit more selfish about what you want, stop worrying about what people think about you. Like I said before, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, what anybody thinks of me is none of my business. I think that's really true. So, the next step is teaching you the meditation that's coming along very, very shortly. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.